I said good evening, everybody. Good evening, yes. I'm so happy you all came here tonight. And welcome here at Pakhuis Zwijger, one of my favorite places ever, of course. You just saw a little clip about WeMakeThe.City. And actually today is the first day of WeMakeThe.City. It's a 5-day festival. It happens all over Amsterdam, all these different kind of activities, all to make our city better. So if you don't have anything to do yet in your weekend, go to WeMakeThe.City. But today, we are here for the Research Files. Research Files is a program here at Pakhuis Zwijger, where in folds of 3, so in threefold, we dive into a theme that is very urgent and very impactful into our lives. So think about robotics, think about AI, and tonight think about AR, because we are going to talk about augmented reality. This is not the first session. As I said, they all come in threefold. This is actually the third session on augmented reality. And I was curious, who here was at one of the previous sessions on Research Files on augmented reality already? Raise your hand, please. All right, a few. Nice to see you back. Welcome back to the Research Files. For all of you that weren't there, there's not a worry in the sky, because our first speaker is going to talk about what augmented reality actually is and what we talked about a little bit in the previous sessions as well. And even then, you can always step in today. The previous sessions, the first one of the previous session was on the Augmented City. And there, we asked ourselves the questions, how can we make meaningful experience in urban spaces with AR? The second session was on augmented society. And that was on the question, how can we enhance social interaction and social hierarchy with AR? Today we're going to talk about the augmented self. And the main question is, how will we perceive reality when AR is entering our lives, and how will we perceive ourselves, our own identity? And what I feel really strongly about tonight is that we have such a great range of speakers. We have 4 speakers coming up, all from different fields, all different kind of experts. And we're going to talk about what it is to experience something of yourself. How can you experience yourself, and how do you relate yourself to your social and technical surroundings? We're going to talk about AR itself, what is it exactly, and how can we use it in the best way. We're going to talk about fashion and how fashion influences our self as well. So I'm really enthusiastic about this, about the whole night. What I should say as well is for everybody to please shut down your phones or even put them on silent, please. And also, we have 4 speakers. Of course, we want to have an interaction with the audience. But if you have a question, please keep it in mind. And at the end of the event, we have a large Q&A with all the 4 speakers here on stage, and you can pose your questions then. So if you have a question, remember it till the end of the evening, and then we'll post all the questions. All right. Then we go over to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Galit Ariel. She is the founder of Wonderland, which is also the co-initiative taker of this threefold of Research Files. She is a creative and strategic thinker, and at Wonderland is a strategic consultancy as well. She calls herself a digital hippie, and she wants to make reality great again. So please give a round of applause for our first speaker, Galit Ariel. Good luck.
So, is this working? Yes, it is. So, welcome to the Augmented Self, where we will talk about how augmented reality experiences and augmentation of our environment, our experiences, the society, will augment our perception of ourselves. So hello, you beautiful physical human beings, and for those that are watching us through the live stream, hello to you as well. I know you're real, I know you're out there. And let's talk about identity. Identity is a complicated thing. Not because there is a lack of methodology to explain it, from religion to psychology and existentialism. It's because of humans. We somehow tend to make things complicated by being the flawed, wonderful selves that we are. And what if I told you that identity, or what we perceive as identity, is actually something that is not consistent? One of my favorite quotes in one of my favorite books, Alice in Wonderland, says, "I knew who I was this morning, but I've changed a few times since then." I think we all had that sensation at some point of our lives or even our day. And that's because the notion of identity is not a flatline experience. It is something that is subjective, it is complex and multi-layered, it is layered, we are different things to different people, and most of all, it's something that is fluid. So we wake up in the morning one person, something happens to us during the day, and we become someone else. And the reason for that is, as this beautiful prose from 1624 states, no man is an island. We are not detached from our environment. We are not detached from the society around us. Every experience that we go through in our lives and in our days shapes our identity. So we have the constant self, or what we think is the constant self, that has windows or some sort of interaction towards the outer world. We see, we have input from outside, and then this input changes us. And this system is called windows and mirrors. That means that we don't have only things that come in, we change as a result, and we output our own output, and we change them in return. So we have this organic relationship with the world around us, hopefully, if we're living, breathing creatures. And as technology adds a whole new set of mirrors and windows to our lives, we have new channels and new ways to interact with the world around us. And all of a sudden, these mirrors and windows become even more enhanced and more complex. So I'm going to touch a little bit about technology because augmented reality is part of it, but we can't talk about technology without talking about humanity, because I don't know if you were aware of that. Humans are the ones that make technology, and they're also the ones using it or abusing it, changing it and modifying it. So this system is really interesting, and it's going to become even more interesting once we add an interactive layer into our physical space, which is augmented reality. So we have these three interesting layers that we started talking about in the first session. So we talked about what happens when we augment our environment, what happens when we add digital experiences that are layered within our environment. They change it, modify it, maybe even take over it. What happens to our social etiquette around it? How do we interact with and through technology? And today we're really going to deep dive into what AR might do to it. And there's a lot of discussion about immersive technologies and big data and all these emerging technologies that we're tweaking and tinkering with right now. It's not unfounded, but I'm a true believer that if we stick to the core purpose of augmented reality, we will be okay. Because to augment is one of the most beautiful words that I know in the English language. It literally means to add, amplify, intensify, and elevate. It's beautiful. It is the core of why we create technology to start with, right? Technology is made in order to better the human experience, or at least that's what it's intended to do when we use it properly. And to augment our reality is an even more beautiful notion, because the ability to add and amplify our reality, to intensify it, again, if we do it properly, is a wonderful notion. So let's start with some cases of augmenting the environment and adding technology and AR to it. So this is the NASA testing field in the Mojave Desert in 1962. This is a real image of how they had to simulate the hostile environment of Mars. And this is what NASA is doing today. So today what NASA is doing, they're actually using augmented reality experiences to bring together their scientists and explore Mars through telepresence. So their scientists can sit in different parts of the world and convene together and explore their 360 images from Mars and draw conclusions from it. Actually, the audience now can experience Mars through HoloLens and AR technology. And this idea of new presence is quite an amazing idea. The idea that you can experience the remote without needing to be there. This is not to say that this is something we should aspire to. We should always aspire to go and explore the world ourselves. But augmented reality adds to us the possibility to be in two places in the same time. And we have it somewhat through Skype and through video chats, but here we're talking about the real embodiment of yourself in a different space, or the opposite, to bring a different environment into your present self. And we're already living in quite a hyper-reality state. We are invaded by technology input, imagery that actually shaped the mind of the modern person. Our processes and cognitive brain functions have changed because of this exposure to technology. And there is a big question of what will happen to the public space when we will allow augmentation on every layer. When we look around us to this wonderful hyper-reality simulation, it is something that every marketeer dreams of, and I think every human might want to dread. Because when we will get to a point where we won't be able to block our digital input in our physical space, we will be unprotected. And these images bring a lot of questions regarding privacy and ownership. So this is a great example of an installation made by Snap and Jeff Koons at Central Park in New York. So the idea was really noble. The idea was to create an art piece in Central Park by Jeff Koons. I don't personally think it was the right piece of art. I love Jeff Koons's physical presence of object, but it was a great idea. Until 12 hours later, it was hacked. People were not very happy from the idea that somebody is allowed to place even a beautiful art piece in their public space, and they hacked it. And then came a really big question of who owns this digital piece, and who owns the physical space where it's placed in. Is it the artist that his art piece have been hacked? Is it the citizens that their public space been hacked? These are questions that we really need to ask ourselves as we step into this next phase. Because the problem is that nobody is defining it for us. Governments and policymakers are still struggling with technology, and they're still asking what is happening in Facebook. I don't know if you've seen the hearings with Mark Zuckerberg, but the level of questions there really should raise concern into who's going to take care of this third hybrid space. I hope it will be us. I hope it will be policymakers. I hope it will be content makers, but we definitely need to be aware of it. And the other thing that we want to consider is what happens when each one of us will have a digital layer on our personal experience. When I will have my own augmented reality, and you will have yours, and you will have yours. Will we even share the same universe? Or will we move to a mode of multiverse, where we each have our parallel subjective reality, which we kind of have anyways, but in this instance, we might not be able to break the barriers between one and the other. And when we move to the societal aspect, that's when it really becomes really fun. Because in reality, we think of ourselves as one thing. Our mothers think something completely different. Other people also think a different thing, and we kind of want to believe that the truth is in between there, but normally, to be honest, the reality is something completely different. And Alain de Botton, which is one of my favorite philosophers, actually exclaimed that and said, "We don't exist unless there is someone who can see us existing." We are very much dependent, our identity and our sense of self is very much dependent on the social interaction in the society around us. Yes, there are people that live in remote places and maybe have less interaction, But for the most of us, our social interaction defines in a very deep way who we are. And we are trapped between the idea that we want to be unique and special and our need to belong into a societal norm or behavior. And again, when we add technology to it, something really, really weird happens. We find the technological pathways enabling us to behave in ways that we might not have done. So it's easier for us to swipe right or left for people we like or not, rather than approach them in real life. It's easier for us to troll people we've never met and condescend anything they've ever said, because we have a quick pathway into the interaction with them. And again, when we start having this dependency on technology, there's a really big question on how would augmented reality change our behavior. We all know this motion of chasing Pokemon Go. And I think we've all seen some of the really weird interactions that happen through
got Vaporeon in Central Park, New York. Now this stampede was caused when a Vaporeon was spotted in Central Park by the crowd. As you can see in this video, people are parking in the street, they're leaving their cars, everyone is dropping what they're doing and rushing over to catch this Vaporeon.
So this very bizarre behavior was made by chasing a fictional character that people kind of knew did not exist. And it didn't stop by stepping into traffic. People were falling off cliffs chasing it. People were swimming to the ocean with their mobile phones, which this is the part I don't understand, and actually drowned as a consequence. People were praying and bullying and attacking people by using this application. And I think the worst of all that we are seeing today is how some governments, which I will not name, it's China, are actually using augmented reality interface to create a social quantification of their citizens. So they're using big data as the engine and the interface of augmented reality to give a social score to people. And this is perhaps something that looks bizarre, but this is something that we might all, maybe not in Europe, because thank God we have GDPR for now, but this is something that is very possibly will happen in the near future. Because I don't know if you're aware of it, but your biometric data does not belong to you. It's not considered as personal data or property. And the question is also, what are we going to do to defend ourselves? How are we going to counter surveillance? And what kind of tools and means are we going to have in order to protect our privacy? Because if all of a sudden anyone can attach any digital asset into my physical body, there's a big question of how much we would like this drone dick on our face, which will probably be one of the first applications. And it looks really funny, but we all know that that is the magic app that will happen and monetize again. And how much are we going to use it in the public space in order to mark people, objects, and spaces ourselves? So we're adding the physical interaction into infinite digital possibilities. Again, could be wonderful, should be wonderful, but we really have to be aware of what it can make. And, of course, when we come just to the self, and I'm saying just with parentheses, we also have to realize that this idea of this infinite possibilities is also very much dependent on our physical human body. So we would like to think that we can think in very abstract ways. But the truth is that one of the biggest parameters for cognitive recognition is called the mirror test. And the mirror test is actually a test that checks whether a species can identify themselves and react to their reflection in the mirror. So luckily for us, we're one of the few species that can do it. So it's us, one species of monkeys, orcas, dolphins, and one elephant called Happy. So it's basically us and Happy that can claim that we have cognition of our physical space, of our physical body. And it is true that also thanks to technology and thanks to this new system of mirrors and windows, we're having a more fluid understanding of gender, of race, and of our physical expression. But the truth is that when we go to the virtual world and when we try to embody ourselves, we always end up maybe being a different gender or with slightly enhanced body parts, but we end up normally being creatures with 2 legs and 2 hands, which we don't really need in a virtual space. We don't really become this fluffy cloud because we know how to interact with the world through our physical bodies. This is what we understand, and this is how we create ourselves. And I find this image really amusing because these virtual avatars are using a mobile phone in the virtual space in order to capture the image. So we are very much constrained by the physical interactions that we have in order to embody ourselves even in this virtual space. And there begins like a very interesting phenomena. So does anybody know who she is? This is a virtual supermodel with over 1 million followers on Instagram. So we're starting to have complete virtual presence entities that are having their own characteristics, their own live stream of selves, and they're winning big campaigns, actually. She's not the only one. And a lot of brands are seeking into creating these completely plausible, moldable entities in order to draw us in. And I'm not necessarily against it. I actually think it's quite fun to add lenses and appearances to ourselves. This is something we should and could explore. But again, when we consider the fact that we also don't own our physical presence, this is something that we really should think about. Because again, I don't know if you know, but in order to sue somebody for taking your image, you have to prove that a physical harm or a reputation harm was made to you. So if I choose to appear like anyone in the audience from now on until the end of days through the use of augmented reality, honestly, as long as I don't pretend to be them and I just look like them, this is perfectly legal and fine. I don't mind, you can all take my image, but I don't know if all of you feel comfortable with that. Especially when we're moving into these technologies that are completely plausible and available today. So these AI demonstrations have been around for a few years. And this is where we start asking ourselves, what happens in the borderline between deep fake and fake reality? How are we going to establish our understanding on reality if anything can be augmented? How are we going to differentiate between the real and what we perceive as real? And it's a really big question, because our belief systems and our religions are built on what we believe we saw or other people saw. And as technology is diving deeper and deeper into the spiritual apps, anybody have a mindfulness app in their phone? Yeah, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that right now we have an app behind a screen, and the day that Jesus will resurrect in my bedroom is not so far away. We think it's ridiculous, but I can tell you from Judaism, you can fax your wishes to the Wailing Wall. And guess what? The Pope has an Instagram account. So religion never loses an opportunity to never lose an opportunity. And as we're going to move into this physical cyber nexus, where this wonderful wonderland can appear in our physical space, we really have to ask ourselves whether or not augmented reality make a better version of ourselves or just a pale replica. And let me tell you, there's nothing worse than a bad replica, and I'll demonstrate it. Sorry, I have to dance it out. So, luckily for you, there are ways and there are solutions, and we're going to hear about it today. And I can tell you that if and when we will create experiences that don't just adhere with our physical space or our functional space, but actually adhere with our societal needs, with our behaviors, with the fact that we're these imperfect humans, which is a perfectly great thing, then we could truly create a beautiful experience through augmented reality that will allow us to explore further ourselves and our identities and go into a wonderful, hypnotic, and ongoing state of not just being, but becoming. So thank you so much, and I hope you would all use AR consciously and responsibly so we can indeed make reality great again.
Thank you so much for that great presentation and a great overview of augmented reality. I think we all get really a great sense of where augmented reality can take us, where it shouldn't, and where it maybe should take us. So thank you so much for that great overview. We're going to dive right into our second speaker of tonight. He's a PhD student at the Radboud University in Nijmegen. He works on the intersection of, and now listen, philosophy, shit, I practiced, but still. Psychiatry and psychology. Wow, quite an intersection, right? And his current research is on the everyday and pathological instances of people not feeling like themselves. Wow. Give him a round of applause for Roy Dings.
Thank you very much. Yes, so what I will be talking about in the next 15 minutes or so is just some parts of my research that might help you have some kind of framework or a novel perspective on what AR might mean for self-experience. So, like it was said, my research is mainly on people not feeling like themselves. So the idea here is, of course, that each and every one of you is who they are, but that you can nevertheless have an experience of not being yourself. And there are pathological cases, which are typically very severe and dysfunctional, but there are also more mundane, everyday cases. So I'm going to assume that at least some of you have had similar experiences when you just, for some reason, are not quite sure if what you're experiencing is still part of who you are or how you see yourself. Now, what we see in our research is that this idea that you're not feeling like yourself is not something that occurs when you're just sitting and contemplating your life, which you might expect, but that instead people feel not like themselves in very everyday, typical situations like getting to work. So imagine that you get on a train to commute to work, and then during that train ride you have this feeling that something's really not right. And maybe at first you might not be able to articulate it, but then over time, or if it happens again and again, or after you've discussed it with people that you discuss such things with, you might come to the conclusion that that train ride to work, or maybe your career as a whole, is not the person that you want to be, right? So it kind of starts with this strange feeling of something not making sense, which eventually might lead to a conclusion of this job is not the job that I should be having. Now, to further understand how people, and especially people in psychiatry, have these experiences, we make use of a notion from biology, which is the notion of a niche. So this is a term that is used to describe how animals change their environment so as to fit their needs. And so the obvious example here is the beaver dam. So as you probably know from your biology class in high school, beavers collect wood, chop down wood, make a dam, and then the result is something like this. And what the beaver basically does is it changes its environment, its ecosystem, in such a way that there is more water on that side of the dam, leading to different kinds of fishes on that side of the dam, the kind of stuff that beavers will like to eat, for example. Now, the whole point of this is that we, as human beings, do the same thing. So we also change our environments in such a way that it fits our needs. And these are, on the one hand, the very basic biological needs, right? So every few hours we get hungry. So what have we done? We've created an environment where there's a supermarket around each corner so that we can eat. But we also have different kinds of needs, which are more personal, maybe even existential, right? And we also change our environment to fit those needs. So the idea here is that we all have a kind of a story about ourselves, right? So you can understand yourself, and a lot of people do, in terms of a story. And you are the main character in that story. And all of the other people around you are just, they also play a part, but you're the main character. So the idea is that our environment is changed to fit that story, your individual story. And each and every one of us does that. Now, you might think, well, what does that environment then consist of? Well, different things. First of all, the people around us, our friends. So friends are very interesting in the sense that, in contrast to colleagues or family, you really select friends, right? So you have probably you have different friends. You have that one friend that that can offer a shoulder to cry on when you're feeling sad. You have a different friend, or maybe it's the same friend, who affords going out with, having a party. So from all the people in the world, you select the people that fit your individual needs, right? But in addition to people, we also use material objects. So environments like homes or offices are very good instances of places that we change in such a way that it fits who we are. And I thought about this in the train ride over here. So there was this show, I think it was on MTV like 15 years ago, where, so I don't remember exactly, but the plot was something like this. You're going to go on a date with someone, but you're not going to see them beforehand, but instead you get to check out their bedroom, right? And so the whole idea of the show was that looking at a person's bedroom says a lot about them, right? So here as well, so we all don't know who lives in these places or whose office this is, but probably already have a sense of who this person is, what this person finds important, the values that this person holds, etc. And the same goes for clothing. So there are some examples here of types of clothing that you can wear. And the whole point is that in choosing a certain outfit, you're basically making a statement. So each and every outfit is a statement, even if it's a very non-controversial one. But the whole point is that if I take a specific outfit, what I'm doing a lot of things, but one of the things I'm doing is I'm making it easy for some people to react in a certain way, right? So if I take the Amsterdam University hoodie or the Hells Angels hoodie, then I kind of elicit certain behavior in other people, right? So I can determine how people respond to me by selecting a certain outfit. So again, that means that I can alter my environment, namely the input that my social environment gives me by, for example, changing my outfit. Other examples include things like pictures of a loved one on your desk. So I'm an academic, so a lot of my working life consists of writing papers and proposal and stuff like that. And it's easy to kind of get caught up in that world and in the values that play a role in that world. So what a lot of people do is they have a picture of a loved one or a picture of a holiday that they've had, put it on their desk to literally remind them what matters in life. So again, what we do is we change our environment to tell us who we really are, how we want to be. Or who we want to be in the sense of you can use motivational posters, which are not that much in vogue anymore. But imagine that you think of yourself, well, I'm quite an introvert person, but I would like to be more extroverted. So I put up this poster in my room saying life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And it reminds me every time I walk out the door that I should be more extroverted, thereby enabling me to change who I am, right? Enabling me to become the person that I would like to be. Now, what's also increasingly happening is that we establish digital environments to, again, fit the story that we tell about ourselves. And this is a story that we tell towards other people, but also to ourselves, right? You might, at some point, remind yourself of why you're doing the things that you're doing. Now, these digital environments, so just think of social media profiles, stuff like that, they're extremely suitable for integrating and connecting the various threads of the life story that you have. And it enables you to display that to the people that you want to display it to, right? So it's a very, it has a lot of possibilities to kind of create the world that you would want, as you would like it to be. Now the question is, what could AR bring to this? Right? So the point that I've tried to make so far is the following. Feeling like yourself coincides with having an environment, a social material environment, that fits that story, the story of who you are. Now, if for some reason your environment does not tell you the story that you would like to hear, then you get this feeling of, something's wrong. Maybe I should change something, maybe I should reflect on this, maybe I should talk it over with people. Now, I think that augmented reality can offer benefits, but also risks. And this is a very broad topic, and we can discuss it later on in the Q&A. I just want to mention two, so one pro and one con here. I think that one more or less obvious pro is that AR might help us to experience only those things in the world that are relevant to us, right? So imagine that you see yourself, right? Your story of yourself is that you're an adventurous person. So when you're walking down the street, you only want advertisements that are about adventurous things. You only want the shops that have adventure gear. I don't know what kind of stuff they would have to sell. But only that is relevant. That is made salient to you. And the rest is all kind of blurred to the background, right? In such an experience of the world, you kind of emphasize who you are. So in everyday life, you kind of have to, because you cannot, of course, change the whole world, you still have to make some sort of a selection of the information that is relevant to you. And AR might be a way of helping you do that, of making only those aspects, like in a busy street in Manhattan, only make those aspects relevant to you, only the things that you want them to be relevant. Now, I think that's also immediately the risk of augmented reality. So the risk here, of course, is that all of the unpleasant information, all of the information that conflicts with your self-image is kept at a distance, right? So the whole point is that some parts of reality are just not very pleasant, right? I think we all agree on that. So the risk here would be that we change our experience of reality to such an extent that all of the unpleasant information is kept at a distance. And again, I think that things like this are increasingly happening. If you spend more time in a digital environment than in the non-digital reality, right, then you get these kind of situations where there is like an echo box or a filter bubble where only the information that fits your worldview is allowed. And I think that's problematic for several reasons. So I think it's very good to, at some points, be confronted with unpleasant information, as I've called it here, which is basically information that does not fit your values, that does not fit your worldview, that does not fit the story that you tell about yourself. And I actually think that this is not something that I'm just advocating here, but that no one would agree with. I think that actually what a lot of people do is precisely this. So what we do every now and then is we step outside of this narrative niche that we've created for ourselves, namely at the moments that we take a holiday or go traveling, take a journey. So what you're basically doing is saying, well, this is my life right here, right? This is the world that I've created for myself, my friends, my office, my home, all of the things changed in such a way as to fit how I see myself. And now for 2 weeks or so, I'm just gonna go somewhere completely else. And actually that going somewhere else enables you to reflect on the situation that you've just left, right? And you might contemplate that, and you might either come to the conclusion, I'm doing pretty well, and just continue your life. Or you might think, well, what I'm doing is actually not the thing that I want to be doing. Who I am is not who I want to be. And so then when you return to your everyday life, you might make some changes there. So the kind of message that I want to put forward is that augmented reality has some promise in making us experience ourselves more like ourselves, in making the world less irrelevant to us and more relevant to who we as an individual really are, but that there's a big risk that that this technology goes so far that we don't have any conflicting information anymore. And that's problematic because it's precisely the conflicting information that enables us to kind of review our own lives and that enables us to grow as persons. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Wait one moment, because I have a question for you. Okay. I was just wondering, when you compare, for instance, social media to now AR, how do you think AR especially, so in itself, has more potential to be beneficial for us than social media can already in experience ourselves?
I think, so intuitively I would say that the main difference is that social media is more or less limited to being connected to a technology like your smartphone. So I'm saying more or less because if you want to put it very black and white, then you still have to kind of make the decision to, for example, go to your Facebook profile to actually engage with social media. And so in this picture, then the augmented reality would be more omnipresent, so it would be everywhere, and you might not always have this sort of decision to step out of it.
Blend more within reality.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that would be one of the main worries there. Of course, this is, I mean, I'm not an expert in that sense, so I have no idea if this would be like a 5 or a 10 or a 50 years in advanced scenario.
We'll go back to that with our next speakers. I think I was hitting the thing. Thank you so much. Thanks, Roy. So now it's time for our third speaker, and he is called Jacob Kok. And Jacob Kok is an independent designer, and he did a lot of things. His background is in fashion, and he even won the Dutch program Project Catwalk. He also designed the first clothing for Sims. Am I saying this right? Sims the game, which I think is pretty awesome. And we're going to talk more about his projects here on stage. I'm going to have a talk with him here. So I'm inviting you, Jacob, to the stage. Yeah, let's sit down. Wil je water? Jacob, what are we seeing here? I think this is a Sims collection, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was curious about. Well, I was mainly this project came about because I saw The Sims as a sort of like really reproducing the physical world. And for me, already at the time, I was thinking like, why would you do that? Like, why would you really, like buy a bed and couch and stuff?
Why would you imitate the real world?
Yeah, I was not so interested in that. So, like, my aim for that collection was to bring a sort of dynamic, moving collection, and also play with the idea that why don't you create something really ugly and not aim for these beauty ideals that we aim for in the physical life.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the collection. Was it also physical collection or only virtual?
Yeah, so what you see is like the physical collection shown that was also available in the game. So I made both.
Oh, okay, nice. So I already said you also had a film coming out that is already out. Can you tell us something about the theme of your work? What do you? What is the overarching theme of all these projects?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. Like, I mean, like the overall theme is that what I mentioned earlier is that I see virtual reality and anything like on a digital platform as an opportunity. And it's such a shame that a lot of marketing is about like, it creates this sort of desires that I feel very bored when I see what we're supposed to want in the digital world. I think like we limit ourselves, and there's so many opportunity there to create a complete universe that we can't achieve without like just physically. So let's embrace it.
Yeah, more diverse, even crazier than we can in the physical world. Yeah, and I think that's a nice bridge to your recent project. We also see here. I don't know if you can show to the audience what you have here.
Yes.
What do you call this?
Oh, this is an augmented reality glasses made by Microsoft. So they call it the HoloLens.
Yes. And what does it do, a HoloLens?
Well, it creates the augmented layer, but it's a transparent pair of glasses, so it doesn't shut you off from the. If I wear it, I can still see you because it's transparent, and it calculates it has a sensor to calculate the space, so it knows where objects are physically, and app developers can put stuff there to augment the reality. Yeah.
So it really layers a new reality in our own reality that you can also see.
Yeah.
Who here in the audience ever wore such a HoloLens? Yeah, of course, the experts here, front row. Yeah, in the back as well. All right. Well, you can all experience it a little bit, but I will really experience it because we're now going to use the HoloLens on me, and you'll see it on the big screen what I'll be seeing. But first off, we're going to use your new project, right? It's part of your thesis, I understood. Can you tell us a bit
Let's not talk about the thesis.
Let's not talk about the thesis?
Yeah, like what we did with for the HoloLens, I worked together with Sander Veenhoff, is basically like what you see, the videos that were shown before is all very limited to like to a screen and stuff. And this device allows you to really put it together in the physical world. Yeah. First, I'm going to show you the first app that we created. It's called Haphazard Me. This one is a so-called sort of creator app. Yeah. Let me start it. Yeah. Then I'll be the model here on the stage, and I'll let you dress me up in virtual garments, so in an augmented layer.
So I'll be the creator right now. You're just the model. Okay. You have to start it up first.
I have to start it.
So right here we see what he is seeing through the HoloLens right now. You can see me waving. It has a bit of a delay.
All right.
Okay. Ja, top. Ja. Perfect.
Go ahead.
Welcome to the world of ensemble the solution.
And you'll see that we had a little bit of a practice because I did this already.
Yeah, so the idea is that pieces of virtual garments pop up, and you direct with the glasses to where you want to place them, and by tapping you attach it to the object.
So what I'm now doing with my hands is I can put the small pieces on him, right?
Yeah, and we also developed this concept out of curiosity, what it would be like to design together with artificial intelligence. So basically the pieces that are popping up are all showing up like randomly, so that there's some sort of, there's less control of what you would create yourself. How do I look?
I think I'm doing pretty well. What do you guys think?
Festive.
Festive. And where have you shown this already? What kind of events or what kind of people are interested in this?
So this was shown at Amsterdam Fashion Week last year, in an installation, and also there's like an accompanying video that explains. We had a few other topics coming together because we also said it was about sustainability. So it was also a bit of this sort of parody on how a lot of technology is used to, come up with these solutions for everything. So we wanted to bring it as a sort of like, we have a solution for everything.
And how does it connect to sustainability in your point of view?
So these pieces that you see, they're all waste pieces of fabric from the industry, because that's a big problem. Do you need help?
No, I'm just...
All these garments that are being created, there's a lot of waste thrown away because it's 2D pieces cut from 2D fabrics. So these waste pieces we used to create new garments, new silhouettes.
But virtual, in the glasses? Or can you also print them at the end, or can you wear them?
Yeah, our solution was like, we promised basically that we would have the computer assemble a new random garment out of all these pieces, and then we would be able to execute it also because there's software that can calculate, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, nice, very nice. I heard we can do another thing with the glasses.
Yeah, so the next one we have is a mirror app. So I'm gonna have to start it.
Yeah, start it up. Looks cool, right, that he does this?
So, what we do is we go to the mirror.
And what are you doing now?
So this is calibrating. Do you guys hear me? It's calibrating the distance to the mirror because it has to show a mirror image.
So he's calibrating it to a picture he's putting on the mirror to calibrate the distance to the mirror.
Yeah, this was happening before.
And of course, it's technology, so technology is always.
But it's weird because it's switching off. You still see something, right?
What do we see?
I don't.
I think we just see a camera. We see the audience. Wave, audience. A bit of a delay, you did it. We already imagined that it could happen, of course, a bit of a delay, but as we know, this happens with all technology. And this also says something about AR, the state of our AR right now, that it's not as fluent as we wish maybe it would be.
No success.
No? Okay, we'll try it again at the end of the event. Will you? Or maybe not. But can you tell me something about what we should have been seeing if it worked?
So, like, we created garments that are like shown on your body, like, so you look at your mirror image, and you wear those virtual garments.
Yeah.
It's important because, like, we have to get rid of these screens. I feel so ridiculous. But wait, can I try one more time to
Sure.
start, maybe?
No?
No.
Let's sit down then.
That's it.
That's it. But when you would compare it, for instance, you might have seen in some shops like H&M, you also have mirrors that you can try on garments that they have at the store without really putting them on.
Yeah.
What would you say is the difference between what you developed and those kind of mirrors?
Well, the big difference is that you look at a camera image of yourself when you look at virtual mirrors.
Yeah.
So you always have, like, you know, sort of like the Kinect is what they usually use, is placed underneath the screen. So you watch at yourself like from like, you know, like low to high.
Yeah.
You can't look yourself in the eye. It's the same as Skype and what's it called, Snapchat.
Yeah.
You can't really make eye contact with yourself, which is weird, right? So the difference is that this is like on your mirror image, so it will be just. Actually, there was a video. Maybe we can quickly show that because
I
is
think we can.
Dimfy up there?
Yes, I think we can start.
Because
the video.
I sent a video, so maybe we can still show like what this would look
that
like.
video. I'm just looking at upstairs. That is a video where we can actually see what we would have liked to show you. I'm not sure if we can find that video that fast, but
All right.
and I thought it was really interesting what you said. We don't just want to replicate reality. We want to make it more extreme, maybe more something we can't do in reality. How do you think how can we motivate people to be more creative and more outside of what we already do in AR?
I kind of gave up, and I'm really fine with it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like.
That's so sad.
Is it? No. I mean, the people that are interested in it, they will continue doing it, and that's the people. Yeah, that you should hang out with and do these things together, because like I don't know, I see a total. In self-representation, this total biased way of representing how you're supposed to be and stuff. And I really don't think we can stop that with our AR, I mean, I hope it will influence a little bit, of course, and I will always aim for it. But the majority of people will just go for this random stuff.
Yeah, the more standardized.
Yeah.
That's why we need designers as you. I
will continue.
Yeah,
I won't stop.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you back at the Q&A at the end.
You're welcome.
Now it's time for our last, but certainly not least speaker. This speaker comes all the way from New York City, and we have to thank the New Institute as well, because they helped us getting her here to Amsterdam. So thank you a lot, New Institute, for that. Her name is Chirryl-Lee Bryan, and Chirryl-Lee is the Director of Experience at Ideon, a global experience design company. She also has a podcast called HCD, where she creates a continuous conversation about design. And that conversation is going to continue right now, because she's entering the stage right now. Please give a hand for Chirryl-Lee Bryan. Here it is. And the clicker.
I'm just going to have a water. I'm parched. Oh, I'm not from New York. I'm Australian.
Here you go.
Awesome, thank you. Now I have to remember which glass is mine, because there's so many glasses up here now. Okay, so let's kick things off. So today I'm going to help you have an epileptic fit with my presentation. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about Augmented reality, experience design, and human-centered design. Before I go on, who here is a designer? Anyone? Okay, quite a few. All right, good. And that means that there are a lot of non-designers here, so we'll try to explain what these things mean. My name's Chirryl-Lee. You can call me Chi, it's much easier. I'm originally from Australia, originally from Sydney, Melbourne, have worked all over the world in design, and now I work in New York City and live in New York. Interesting, the conversation that we've already had a little bit about what augmentation means and self, because as you can see, and you probably can't see that much on me right now, but I'm kind of augmented. And that's kind of a lifelong thing that I've been doing, and it applies to what I do as well. But before we get into that, I'm fangirling a little bit right now because I feel very privileged to be here, especially with Galit, because her and I have been tic-tacking about this conversation for a very long time. So I feel really, you heard what she said before. It's really, really amazing. So I just had to say that. Okay, so getting back to where I was going with this. So before I get into explaining a little bit about these things, I'm going to tell you the story of me and how I have, I guess, created the experience of myself. So I'm a designer. Design really defines who I am. Design is not something that I do. It is who I am. It's inside me. I can't help but do it. Some people would call me a design snob. I haven't ever done anything else. So for more than 20 years, I've been a designer of one form or another, and it's come in many different forms. I started out as a visual designer, shit kicker. I didn't really do any visual design. I just made coffees and got lunches. But since then, I've studied and practiced many different types of design, from visual design right through to UX design, industrial design, architecture, service design, and everything else in between. But just kind of taking a step back a little bit. So I wanted to share a little bit of my awkward design past, because we all have a past, and this is one of my awkward things. So I am slightly dubious to admit that this is still online. This is a website that I made I checked the date on the code and it says 1997. So you do the math. But it is still live and it is still doing what it's sort of supposed to do. And I'm going to come back to this a little later, so remind me, okay? So to continue the story, I have a love-hate relationship with design. When I was younger, people would call me a designer. Didn't really know why. It was just a title that was thrust upon me. And I worked in advertising, so design was this dirty thing, and I wanted to be a creative because being creative is so much more exciting than being a designer. So I fought really, really hard to be a creative, but I kept getting told, you're just not that good at it. So I kind of had to come to terms with this idea, well, I'm not very creative. Why is that? Well, eventually I came to realise that there's a difference between creativity and design. Design is all about doing something with purpose, creating something with purpose. In a nutshell. Creativity doesn't necessarily have to do that. It contributes to it and we can be creative in the process, but there's more to design because we're actually trying to get to something better. So I left the creativity behind, although I like to think I'm a little bit creative, but, and I really started to dive into my design practice to really try to figure out what that practice was and what it meant and what design was, and become the leader that I never had, because I really never had any great leadership to help me understand what really great design was. So that's what I do now. Okay, so getting back to the design part. All right, so what kind of designer am I? Well, that's a little bit tricky for me to understand. So the way that I would describe myself is a transdisciplinary designer with a specialisation in visual design, spatial, and experience. I know it's a mouthful, right? But I'll try to explain that a little bit more. So, transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary really means that, as I said, I've practiced lots of different types of design, and then I sort of mix them together. And I help people to understand how to bring different disciplines together. And that's really important when you're trying to understand what experience design is. So, let's break these things down. What the fuck is experience design? Okay, so experience design, in a nutshell, is an idea. In actual fact, I don't even think that experience design is a design practice in a way. And it often gets confused with UX, so user experience. You probably heard of that. So firstly, I'll give you a bit of an idea about experience design. So the way I like to explain it is that experience design is the notion that everything in the world that we make has an experience attached to it. So this chair has an experience attached. There's a materiality. This rug, it has an experience. That mirror, the lights, the heat that's coming off them. So just to get you in the mood for this, right? So just close your eyes for a minute. Everyone close your eyes. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to do anything. I won't draw a dick on your face in virtual reality. Okay, just think about the chair that you're sitting in. Okay? Think about the chair. Think about the materiality. Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it something that you would want to sit in for more than these 2 or so hours that you're going to be sitting in it? Would you like to take it home? Would you like to have it in your kitchen or at your dining table? Or would you prefer something else? Now we're starting to think in the realm of what experience means. So everything that we create in this world, you can open your eyes now, it's okay. Come back. Everything that is created in this world has an experience attached to it. And therefore, experience design can be thought of as a mindset to frame design. So rather than thinking of things as things or products or spaces or services or systems, we can think of these things in our world as experiences. And this is especially important when we start to talk about non-tangible things like AR, because there's no tangibility to that, so we have to think about it in a completely different way. And there's a lot of things we have to think about when we're thinking about a non-tangible, invisible thing, especially when it comes to the way that we design. So, next up, what the fuck is human-centered design? So this gets bandied around a lot as well. Human-centered design is not very difficult to explain. Essentially, it's about designing for humans, putting humans at the center of what we create. So we actually think about things from the human perspective. And we try to make life better because of it. And I like to take it a little bit further and call it humanity-centered design, because I want to think bigger than just humans. I think there's other things on this planet we need to take into account too, but that's another story. However, human-centered design is another way that you can think about design. And what we need to do is we need to include the people that we are designing for in the process of design. This is very important, because for a long time, the stuff that we make, and you can think of something in your head that is not designed very well, that has really been shitting you. It probably wasn't designed with humans in mind. So these clickers usually drive me crazy. This one's okay. It's doing all right. But usually I find that the pressure that you have to place on the button is a little bit sensitive. And I don't think they were necessarily designed with humans in mind. I mean, there's an ergonomic situation going on here, but all right. And then, what the fuck is immersive design? Oh, geez, you're really taking it out of me today. All right, so really what we're talking about here is, and I think that we've already heard about what this can be, but imagine that we created layers and layers around us of things that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be layers and layers. I mean, immersive design can be something that's done in a physical space. You know, there's immersive design right now. So, you know, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a Yayoi Kusuma art exhibition. That's a good example of something that's quite immersive. But, you know, very specifically when we're talking about this kind of immersive AR, we're sort of talking about the digital space. And again, I think that it's very important to think of things in this way. So again, coming back to UX. UX is essentially the detailed design of digital products. That's basically what we're talking about. And then we have layers around that. So as I mentioned before, there's some other things, like there's something called omni-channel design experience, which is basically when you have a series of digital touch points that link together. You can have customer experience, which is where you're talking about the design specifically for consumers. You can have service design, which is thinking about bigger ecosystems that tie services and digital touch points and systems and products and all kinds of things together as one. And then beyond that, that's where you really get into the sphere of experience design. And experience design, some people ask me, what's the difference between service design and experience design? For me, it's that, and I think Gil illustrated this beautifully about the self and society. It's a little bit like that. Experience design doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there's things that impact you internally when you're designing for experience, but then there's also things that are impacting you from the outside in. And that's another type of design, that's called ontological design. So now we're getting really crazy, all right? So we're really getting deep into design. So ontological design is the premise that the things that we design end up designing us, and thus design them, and they design us, and it's a constant loop of design and betterment. Okay, so, oh my God, how do you design for all these things? This is the thing, right? So it's all and good to talk about this stuff, but we have to figure out how we would actually design for these things. And you know, when we talk about AR, we're talking about something that is quite complex because you know it hasn't really been invented yet. So I put together 10 things to consider when designing for immersive experiences based on experience design and human-centered design. Okay. You know, I think that it's really important at this point to also point out that I think we've been spoiled in a way by science fiction. Who here loves science fiction? I think we all do, right? It's amazing. And it's amazing just how much of what is in films has become real over the last 20 or so years, okay? But sometimes sci-fi sets us up for a kind of naive realism that this sets us up to fail, essentially, because those things can't necessarily be made possible. And I think that what we've already seen today when we were watching the demonstration, you know, of where virtual reality is at right now, you know, we have to take this into account. And you know, and I'll get into this in a minute, but you know, whether or not we should be doing these things is something important to think about. Oh. Okay. So, number one, shit is already really complex. We live in an increasingly complex world. You know, I explained, you know, UX and and service design and all these things, all of these layers of complexity that we live within, that we don't really see, but they're there under the surface. Imagine that you have all of that complexity and, you know, like, it's a little bit like there's this layer of simplicity on the top. So it's not, you know, when you use an app that you like and then it just messes up? And then there's all of these complex things and you have to like, or a service that you like that just messes up. And you have to ring them up and then it's a mess and it's just not very good. Imagine that we start adding layers of complexity and complexity like an onion onto the top of that. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about AR. And I find it's a conundrum because on the one hand, it's really awesome and cool and there's so much that you can do with it. But at the same time, there's so much shit that we've already created that's not working. Should we just be adding more and more and more to this? I'm not really sure. Okay, number 2. We're going to need to go beyond interactions as we know it. Okay, so at the moment, the interactions that we know when it comes to digital particularly, and various other things. So let's go back to some technologies that we know. All right, so radio, we kind of knew what the interactions were that we would have to have with that. And by interactions, I mean the way that we interact with that thing. And then television came along and we created a new set of interactions with television, changing the channel and whatever. And then, more recently, and I suppose you could think about things like video and DVD and so forth, we learnt these new languages. We learnt these new languages for not communicating, but interacting with these things. And then the internet came along and we had to learn a whole bunch more, okay? And we've kind of become accustomed to using the internet and all of the things that you have to do with that. And then mobile phones, we're just sort of getting used to the interactions that we have with those. So imagine that we have to go beyond that completely. And in in a realm of infinite multiverses, how many different types of interactions can you have? I mean, you have to think about it in a completely different way. It's no longer just these ones and these ones and these ones and these ones or whatever we were doing just before. There's a lot of different types of interactions that we're going to need to have, gestural interactions and beyond. So that's something that we're going to need to think about. Okay, so number 3, interface to the power of infinity. And this sort of reflects the one that I just mentioned, the way that we interact with these things. The types of interfaces that we're going to be using are going to be totally different to what we're used to right now. Just the way that, as I mentioned, radio is to what we have today. There's this vast gap in between. So it's actually a little bit like going back to my awkward website from when I was a kid. That compared to what you can do today with web design is, there's no comparison. And I think AR is at the same kind of stage that my website was at 20 years ago. That's really where we're at right now. So imagine, and also the exponential rate of change, which is the idea that things are changing faster than ever before, means that probably it's not going to take 20 years for AR to catch up. It's probably going to take, I want to say 5. I was going to go 2.5, and no, that's a bit, but 5 probably is what we're looking at. And then imagine on top of that, what types of technologies could come along in between now and then. So we're going to have to think about the way that we interface with these things as well. Okay, so number 4, augmented ergonomics. So, like when we imagined our chair and we felt the experience of the chair, a lot of thought goes into the design of ergonomics and the way that people interact with, very specifically, things in workplaces and systems. Like, say, for example, public transport and so on. There's a lot of ergonomic thought that goes into that. The way that we sit, the way that we move our bodies. We're really going to have to think about that in a whole new way because, I nearly freaked out when you guys I thought you were going to fall off the stage. There's a lot of things to think about. And there's already been people, certainly with VR, that are hurting themselves because of, and, Galit's video about Central Park, that kind of movement completely changes the way that we think about doing things in the real world. So we're going to have to think about making sure we don't end up hurting ourselves or changing ourselves in a way that makes us evolve badly. Like the hunch. Okay, number 5, innovation frequency. So what this means is that we're going to have to think about, certainly as designers and people who are involved in the design process, and I think that in the coming years, more and more and more people are going to become involved in the design process, how quickly we go out to market with this technology. Because the truth is that we just cannot burden people with an overflow, an overwhelming amount of technology. We just can't keep up even today. So we need to make sure that we're not going to overload people with new technologies, and we need to create incremental changes, plan incremental changes to make sure that people can keep up with the changes that are happening. Okay, number 6, and this is truly probably the most important thing. So when it comes to designing for technologies like AR and other immersive technologies, we need to put humans first. We need to make sure that we're designing for people and not just designing because it's cool, because it's possible, because it's going to make money, any number of other reasons. And number 7, and I think this is particularly important to this particular talk and this particular event, because design is not for you. So as a designer or someone who's involved in the design process, we need to remember that whatever you are making is not for you yourself. So we've been talking about augmented reality and the augmented self. And it's a very self-centered conversation in a sense, because we're thinking about how that would affect us. But as a designer, we need to be thinking about how it affects others. And that's why it's so important to work with people, other people that you're designing for, to make sure you're designing something that's actually going to be meaningful for them. Number 8 is you're going to need to be resilient if you're going to try to make this stuff, because people are going to try to tell you that you're wrong, that it's not going to work, that it's going to be a waste of time, that it's shit. People aren't going to believe you. You're going to get up on stage and they're not going to hear what you're saying. They're going to think that you're full of rubbish and fluff. I sure as shit get told it all the time. But you're going to need to be resilient and get back up again. Because the truth is that there are no rules for inventing the future. That's the truth. Like, I know some stuff, I've got a lot of experience, and I work at this so hard. I work at making sure that I'm designing better, as much better as I can every time I put my mind to it. But the truth is that nobody really knows what's going to happen tomorrow, and nobody knows what's going to happen with any of these things. So you just got to stick at it and be willing to throw all the rules out the window. And finally, and I sort of touched on this before, and why have I got Jeff Goldblum? You need to go and watch the original Jurassic Park, which is really pertinent right now, because there's this amazing quote that he says in it. And it's essentially that it's a little bit about how might we or why should we. You know, a lot of the time we do things just because we can and not because we should. So I hope that with these new technologies that designers out there are shaping the conversation around the experiences that people have with these things and the reasons that we're doing them and the impact that they're going to have into the future, because, you know, you just never know what the unintended consequences of these things might be down the track. And that's me.
Thank you so much. Wow, really interesting. And I'm asking you to stay on the stage because we're now going into the Q&A portion of the evening. So I'm going to invite the other speakers as well. Please all come to the stage and have a seat. Take some water. And I'm going to start the Q&A off by asking you, we have 3 microphones for you, so you have to share a little bit.
We have.
What I'm curious about is, we have a lot of designers in the room, and one very clear message that I got from actually quite all of you is that if you are using AR, it has to make sense. It has to have a purpose that is fitting, that is beneficial for us, the humans, the end users of it. So imagine these designers that are in the room. Tomorrow, next week, next month, they're in a meeting, and their coworkers say, we have to do something with AR because it's so cool, it looks so fancy, we should do something with it. Then they ask the question, yeah, but why? What are reasons then, in that conversation that you should say, yes, let's use AR? What are good reasons that you should use AR? Whoever wants to answer.
Hello. The biggest question is, which you should always ask whenever you apply any technology or any design to anything, is this the right one for what we're trying to achieve? So the question is, what are we trying to achieve? Is this the right method or tool for that? And for augmented reality in particular, the question is very simple. Does it augment an existing experience or an environment? Does it really add value to it? Does it amplify it? Because there's a reason why I use make reality great again. Because I'm very cautious about the fact that, virtual reality is aimed to create an alternative reality. That's very, very clear. But with augmented reality, if we start creating augmented layers that instead of augmenting and amplifying existing behaviors or existing environments, they hijack them, then we're using it wrong, I have to say. And reality is great. It's complicated, it's difficult, it's ugly at times, but this is what we have, the physical self. As long as we wake up in the morning and go to sleep and have to eat, this is what we should deal with.
Yeah.
And if augmented reality can make it better, more meaningful, different, more deep, then it's the best tool that is possible and available.
Thanks. Any other answers?
Yeah, I think that... Oh, yeah. I'm really happy with these mistakes, to be honest, because there's many apps or applications for different types of media using augmented reality that are really a mistake, that I really hate. And then they come up with things that I would never come up with, but it doesn't mean that they're not meaningful, because I see a lot of projects that I would never come up with, but still kind of create a different vision of which direction you want to go.
Could you give us an example of something you didn't really like, but still it had some value?
There was this embroidery sort of garment that was made by it had an app, and the jogging round that you did in the morning would then translate, the map of it would translate to your dress, and it would embroider the
route that you want. Okay.
And then it's technology, and then it becomes physical and more personal and stuff. And these kind of examples really makes me want, there's a few good ideas, but there's also a lot of big mistakes there. Yeah. But I'm really happy it's there, because it gives me a good laugh. And it also makes me realize how other people think and what they come up with and how they approach the technology.
Yeah. So there also should be some room for failure or maybe experimenting. Yeah, go ahead.
I like it.
Can I enhance that? Besides that app that I would probably have just one stitch on my shirt, because I believe in reality, but not cardio. So I totally agree with you. The one layer I would put on top of it is, I think there's a difference between experimentation that belongs in the lab, let's say, and sometimes sips into our everyday lives, and it happens, mistakes happen, and we grow and thrive through them. We're also human, so we break things. That's how half of the technology is made. We broke something, and we try to fix it, and then something else came out. But I'm very cautious with augmented reality, because I really do believe the impact of it is potentially so intense, because it is layered within our reality. And we saw it, Pokemon Go was a really low life form of AR. I don't even call it AR, it's geolocated filters, but that's geek talk. And we saw the impact it made in 24 hours. It just went like wildfire in the world. And again, it's great, but with the reach of technology today, I think we could be a little bit more cautious with augmented reality, because we're starting to play with the perception of people of reality and the space and themselves. And
I'll let you answer, and then we'll get to the questions of the audience.
So I worked for a company that made an AR, let's call it AR type experience in inverted commas. Okay, so I'll explain what it was. It was for quite a large car company in South Korea, and it was an app that was on a tablet, and you could go into the car dealership, and instead of having different coloured cars, you could hold the tablet up to the car and change the colour of the car. Now, I found this really annoying because I think that that's not really a good use of resources or time or energy, because why can't you just have a selection of the coatings for the car and a photograph? I mean, a photograph is probably going to show you the colour just as well. I think that that's an example of where you've got a technology being used for the sake of using it, just so that a company can say, hey, we've used AR in some form. And not actually thinking about what real benefit it could have. And probably they should have spent their money on something more beneficial, because, you know, that's probably not, you know, a really great spend of their budget.
So it's not really augmenting the reality. It's, when we ask the question...
It's sales, right? So
It's and that's probably the biggest problem with AR right now, is that trying to figure out how to make it meaningful and it not just be a sales gimmick or some promotional thing.
Marketing tool.
It's a little tricky.
Who here has a question for one of our speakers or all of our speakers? Yes, I'll come to you. Please state your name and maybe the field you work in, and then you can ask your question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Fleur Eyman, and I work for a building association, housing association in Amsterdam. And right now we're thinking about developing maybe an app, an AR app, for status holders and other new residents in the Netherlands to overcome a language barrier and to notify them about hazards in their house, in their new home. So I'm curious, so I'm trying to figure out what it would be good, if it is a good idea or not. So this is a really interesting discussion. Do you have an example about an AR app or application that you're actually all really enthusiastic about and of which you can say, that's good practice, we should have more of that?
Thank you.
Yes, I have two. And I have one that I really love because I'm a nerd hippie person, and it's called Love Signs, and it was made for the 60th anniversary of the hippie movement. There was an exhibition in San Francisco, and it was a very simple application, also geolocated, where people in the San Francisco Bay Area could live little icons of hearts in the bay with really lovely love messages, and other people could come and kind of like unlock them and get these love messages. And I felt it was very appropriate to the theme. It was very inclusive and social, and it was also, it didn't demand a lot of commitment, let's say. It was just this nice gesture that was materializing through a technology. And I think, especially I think at the phase that we are with AR and understanding how it interacts, thinking not in like big, immersive takeovers, but in behaviors that can have these little nuances to it that you can amplify with technology, is really the right way to go and experiment at this point. There's another application, which is a navigation application, which was made in the Tokyo aquarium. So they had an issue that nobody could find the aquarium, and they had like a low visitor rate. And they just made a super simple kind of navigation app where you had these two little penguins that you would activate, and you would just follow them to the aquarium. And it was super simple, again, very appropriate, and just did what it needed to do. And these are my two favorite apps from, I think both of them from 1 or 2 years ago. And to be honest, I haven't seen anything great since, because I think a lot of developers are now getting very excited about how the technology is evolving, and they're really running with it. So they're really working on gesture, and they will get there. But I'm kind of missing the very simple, amplifying, human, nice, augmented reality.
Any other examples? Yeah?
Look, I was going to, well, living in New York, the IKEA app is kind of interesting. Now, I don't really like it that much, but I can tell you that in New York, going to IKEA is like a nightmare. And you pretty much have to order all of your furniture online. So that means it gets delivered, which means that the first time you see it is when you take it out of the box and it's not right. So the idea behind the IKEA app is super. The idea that you can place objects into your living space and test it for yourself before you buy. There's something fantastic about that. I think they probably need to work on a little bit more. Now, there's this other app. Now, I can't remember what it's called. Maybe you know, and I don't really know if I would really call it AR, but I think that it's edging towards it. It's this fantastically beautiful app that's been around for a long time. It's a star map. Do you know what it's called? It might be called Star Map, but essentially you can move around and see various different overlays of star maps of the sky, and it's beautiful. Like the way that it works is just magical. But that's a really interesting point. That it's such a simple little thing. It doesn't have to be overt.
And Roy, I was wondering, because this is a very question about human interaction. What do you think about when we talk about asylum seekers, for instance, or status holders? What could an app like this enhance their sense of self or their well-being here?
Well, so I really like this initiative, mainly because what I see in the AR development is that it's mainly used for, well, I would say more or less nonsense things, like the car company where you can hold a tablet and it changes the color. I mean, is that really was that really like a problem that we had to overcome and now we've solved it, right? So the idea of augmenting reality kind of implies that there is something wrong with reality, or at least not up to the standards that we would like it to have, and that we improve it. Now, I would say that there are a lot of cases where, no, let me say differently. So I hope that everyone here actually has, pretty nice experience of reality. However, there are people for whom reality is more problematic. And I would like to see more attention of AR development to that. So, the status holders who don't speak the language, I mean, for them, that's an actual problem that I think AR can very much help solve. Yeah. I do understand that, I mean, business and technology is typically aimed first, at first it's a luxury product, and then over time it gets applied to like healthcare settings. But I would really like that transition to happen quickly, because I think that there can be very nice applications in, for instance, healthcare. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, does that answer your question? Thanks. Any other questions? Yes. First, name and the work field you're in.
Sure. I've got it.
No, okay.
Oh, you? Okay, sure. I'm Prachi, and I've got a background in experience design. Yeah, and my question can be for anyone. It's mainly about what Roy said earlier about relevant information coming up in your experiences as a, during your AR experience. When we talk about relevant, obviously the people designing the product seems so far have been deciding what's relevant, and this is probably coming from marketing. How can designers or people like yourself become step up and go into the forefront of that conversation before when the brief has been decided? So we can say like Jacob has been working on the fashion side of things. Instead of redesigning, say, what it looks like, maybe it can be more innovative socially, like social innovation as opposed to technological innovation. How can we be more involved in that?
Go ahead.
Supply and demand. It's very easy, and it's very, very difficult. The fashion industry started changing only a few years ago seriously towards sustainability, not just because it wanted to, but because customers demanded it. So raising awareness and asking the hard question is not something that necessarily commercial entities do out of whim. I think it's changing. I think we are seeing a lot of awareness towards creating meaning and meaningful, and there is some sort of rejection to this kind of rat race that we've been in. The second part is policy making. So especially with AR, in technology in general, policymakers are so slow to react. And with AR, this is, in my mind, a big concern because in this third hybrid space, if nobody regulates it, it's whomever gets there first. So it is about the tendency, the mindset of society. So a lot of it, all these talks that we initiated here started from a sense of urgency, that we need to talk about AR inside a physical space. We need to talk about AR in society. We need to talk about AR in the self because it will come, and if we don't create that meaning, somebody else will do it for you. And there's place for marketing things. There's meaning to that, to the economy. It's all fine. But I really hope, and I think we brought it before, that it can really add something more.
And what do you think is the role of the designer in this? So apart from policy, apart from what the customers want?
I don't know at what point, I'm a little bit older, so when I was studying design, I was a product designer by training, and we were taught that everything we make, we're accountable for. So if I make a chair with 4 legs, and one of the legs breaks, and the customer hurts themselves, it's my fault as a designer. With fast consumption and with the changing economy and with digital design, there seems to be less and less sense of accountability about it. A lot of finger pointing for the consumers. I mean, Niantic actually, when people started dying because of Pokemon Go, and they died because of Pokemon Go, and I will not go back on that, I'm sorry. They blamed the users, or they added this warning sign, please don't step into traffic while you're using it. But the truth is, they never regulated, or they never intentionally placed these geolocated filters in places that were not harmful. So these people were swimming to the ocean because there was a Pokemon there. You cannot create an experience and tell people you need to chase it and then say, well, but if you do and something happens to you, that's not our fault. So I think a lot of it is accountability. And I'm really happy to see that even in big companies like Microsoft, and I applaud the Microsoft employees that I think today or yesterday demanded that their CEO raises a public voice against what's happening there with the immigration. And we saw Google employees that were threatening to resignate, and some of them have because of their intention to join the Pentagon drone AI program. So we're seeing people raising and rising. And we're seeing more and more designers understanding that they can't just say, I'm just doing my job, or I'm just writing the code, or I'm just creating this experience, and I'm not accountable for it.
Being more accountable.
Yeah.
Perfect. We have time for one last question. Who wants to? Yes.
Can I just jump in 1 second? And that's good at a day-to-day level as a designer. I think we have to be more willing to put our hand up and say this isn't right. If you see something in your day-to-day design work that doesn't feel right, it doesn't look like it's doing something that's going to be good for someone, that there's a flaw in it, you need to raise the alarm, and that's being accountable. And if someone else above you is prepared to say, oh, well, there's a couple of things. One, that then is probably an indication that if you feel like your values and your ethics don't match with the place that you're working, you need to find a new place to work. And you need to be willing, if you need to be willing to stand up for your craft. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unscrupulous people who are prepared to make things that are meaningless. And interestingly enough, if I had to say what I think the role of the designer is going to be in years to come, it's not to create things, it's to take them away. we're going to have to undesign the world that we've created because we've created so much crap. So be bold, stand, you know, and I guess that's why I work for a company like IDEON. You know, it's the type of place where you can stand up and say something like that and be heard. That's incredibly important to me as a designer. So yeah, stand up for what you believe in.
Perfect, thanks. Here, the last question.
So talking about doing good, how could AR augment education?
Thank you.
Well,
when I heard a talk from you, you were talking about spatial computing, and that's like with the glasses, it's like the most amazing thing, you know, it's really spatial. So there's so much more interaction that you can create between people. There's like, you know, you're not limited to a screen, and compared to how we're looking at telephones at the moment, you know, this takes away the interaction between people, and spatial computing makes it, you know, like a playground with like all this dynamic elements. So I think you should totally embrace it.
Can you explain real short what spatial computing actually is?
Yeah, so like you saw in the demo, it's like the screens could pop up in the environment. So if you have like interactions, you can just place them at a wall and then maybe move them to another corner. So
or be layered over objects. So all of a sudden, objects will have interfaces of their own. And imagine kids touching things again and playing with things and making things.
I want that education.
Right? Wouldn't it be nice if kids would actually play with things and touch walls and something will happen? So, you know, I actually think this is the beauty of AR. It will reconnect us potentially back to engagement systems that we already know, and there's a lost generation there that, you know, I feel for, the M word, that is used to swiping and clicking and unfortunately kind of lost a lot of knowledge that older generations have. And it actually makes, this is why we have a depression crisis in the world, because we don't touch each other enough, we don't look each other in the eye, we don't actually talk and engage with the physical world, and it creates physical processes that makes us all depressed. So never blame millennials, it's not their fault, we created all their problems. That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. In the meantime, we see the video that we tried to show before. So here we see, I think we see Jacob, right? It's you.
Yeah, I made a morning ritual, like me brushing my teeth while going through my virtual garments. So that could be a future scenario if it's up to me.
Yeah. So we see you trying on different garments while brushing your teeth. Nice. Well, with that, I would like to conclude the event. So I would like to thank you again, all our amazing speakers. Again, give them all a round of applause, please. Thanks for coming. Have a great discussion. Yes?
This is coincidental, but there's a row of people sitting there that I would like to, you, don't look behind you, that I would really like to thank for the reason I'm on stage today. So coincidentally, and it was not planned, I have the editor of the book, Augmenting Alice, the two wonderful, amazing graphic designers from the Lux Design, and my poor husband that had to create an augmented layer for it. And he started as a VR boy, so he's converted. So I want to thank you. Please stand up.
Please raise your hand to stand up. Yeah, raise your hand. Good.
And
perfect.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you all, if we want to follow you, if you want to check what you're doing, do you have something to plug? Where can we find you? Please, all.
You can get me on most social media at CHIRRYN. No, wait, that was totally wrong. CHIRRYLLERYAN. I know it's ridiculous. Like that's my full name. I know, annoying. So this is
recorded, so you can look it back home and write it out.
That means that I spelt my own name wrong on stage.
Yeah.
How embarrassing. The other thing that you can do is you can find me on This Is HCD, which is a podcast. So go to thisishcd.com. It's all about human-centered design. We talk to people all over the world who are practicing all different types of design and how they incorporate designing for humans. And that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Perfect.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Galit Ariel and on Instagram at the AR Girl. You can also email me. The email is in the book. You can buy my book. You can play with the AR layer. And as of next week, we're opening it up for developers and designers. So if you have creative ideas for the AR layer of the book, please send it to the email that's in the book.
Thanks.
I'm here with Sander tonight to give you a personal demo on the HoloLens. We brought two, so we have both apps that you can try. And yeah, I'm mainly active on Instagram, so find my name on Instagram.
Perfect.
So if you're interested in my research, then you can find more information, some of the stuff that I've written on my academia page. So basically just Google my name, Weddings, Academia, and you'll find it. Or just come talk to me afterwards. That's fine as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And we'll be in the bar.
Sorry?
We'll be in the bar.
Yeah, exactly. We can. I saw some more questions. You continue in the bar downstairs. Let me conclude by saying that We Make the City is still, it's only beginning this day, so we have 4 days left. And you can buy a band for 10 euros, and then you can go to all these events. But I have a little bit of a small surprise for you, because I see a lot of bands here in the audience, and I have a little small Oprah moment right now, because you all already got a band. What? So you get a band, you get a band, everybody gets a band. You can all go now to WeMakeThe.City. No, WeMakeThe.City. And there you can look for the full program, all the activities that are out there. This event was for free, and there is a pay-as-you-like system. So if you have some money to spare, if you really liked it, please donate to Pakhuis Zwijger, because that way we can keep these events for free. Thanks a lot. Enjoy your drink downstairs, and see you next time.